promoting dialogue.
It's 6 p.m. in Dakar, 7 p.m. in Cotonou. Good evening and welcome to Newslink, live on West Africa, Democracy Radio, 94.9 FM and worldwide at wadr.org. First, the top stories. Burkina Faso suspends a student union over terrorism allegations. Senegalese President Diomaye Faye urges calm and national cohesion as the country celebrates Eid al-Adha.
On the occasion of this Tabaski celebration, we are aware of the sacrifices many of you have made to celebrate this festival with dignity.
Liberia's Center for Transparency and Accountability raises alarm over missing millions of dollars in government revenue. Nigeria's former Vice President Atiku Abubakar wins opposition ADC primary for 2027 elections, but critics question his victory.
There are no winners and no losers. Our people look up to us for leadership. I'm ready to lead.
Please stay tuned for details of these stories and more.
On the news, this is Augustine Bill Coley.
Thank you for joining our broadcast. We begin in Burkina Faso, where the authorities have suspended the General Union of Students, known as UGEP, for 3 months. The government accuses the student organization of condoning terrorism after it criticized the authorities' handling of armed groups' violence. Several UGEP officials have also been arrested as tensions grow over security and freedom of expression in the country. Francis Boniface tells us more.
The suspension came a day after the General Union of Students of Burkina Faso released a statement criticizing the transitional government. In the statement issued on the 36th anniversary of the assassination of student leader Dabo Bukari, the organization condemned the government over his death. It accused the authorities of violating democratic rights, political freedoms, and suppressing trade union activities in the name of the fight against terrorism. The union also denounced the abduction and detention of citizens, alleging that some had been taken to the front lines, while others had been secretly held in undisclosed locations for years without ever appearing before a court. In the same statement, the General Union of Students of Burkina Faso lamented what it described as a failure in the fight against terrorism, pointing to a clear inability to restore security. These remarks led to a 3-month suspension imposed by the Ministry of Public Liberties, as well as the arrest of several student leaders during the night of May 25 and May 26. On Wednesday, May 27, Burkina Faso's public prosecutor, Lafama Prosper Tiombiano, announced the opening of an investigation and the initiation of legal proceedings in response to the Students' Union's latest statements.
Francis Boniface with those details. Meanwhile, Burkina Faso is intensifying efforts in the fight against terrorism and security of territorial borders. To this end, the transitional government is recruiting over 100,000 citizens into the armed forces after a majority vote on proposed legislation that allowed the establishment of a military reserve system. The Burkinabe Army says the recruitment drive would enable the national defense apparatus as the country continues to face extremist violence and instability. Usma Uma completes the story.
By December 2026, Burkina Faso will recruit and train 100,000 people to form a military reserve. The People's Legislative Assembly recently adopted the bill establishing the status of this military reserve. According to the Minister of Defense, General Celestine Simpore, this law is a proactive measure.
Given the current circumstances, even independently of the fight against terrorism, the geopolitical situation of the world, the alliances that are made and broken, a world in which force now prevails over law, it seems imperative that we arm ourselves more and more to prevent any eventuality.
This law applies to all Burkinabe citizens aged 18 and over who are physically fit. Mobilization is planned in the event of security threats, armed conflicts, natural disasters, or national crisis. Minister Simpore says the law provides for 2 types of reservists.
First-order reservists and second-order reservists. First-order reservists are those who already have military experience, training and expertise, particularly those from the defense and security forces. Second-order reservists will be selected from the general population, meeting age and medical criteria, and will undergo training before joining the second-order reserve.
The Burkinabe authorities plan to prioritize the mobilization of former military and paramilitary personnel before turning to the civilian population.
Usma Umar with the details of Martin Kabat's report from Ouagadougou. Here in Senegal, Muslims in the country today marked the Eid al-Adha, Islamic rites locally referred to as Tabaski. Addressing the nation after Eid prayers, President Bassirou Diomaye Faye called for peace, social cohesion and national unity. The Senegalese head of state also acknowledged the sacrifices of the population and officials during these difficult times as the country finds itself at a crossroads of economic and social issues such as unemployment.
On the occasion of this Tabaski celebration, as we observe the Abrahamic ritual sacrifice, I extend my warmest wishes for peace, good health, and shared prosperity. Tabaski reminds us that we must be willing to give up a part of ourselves for something greater than ourselves. It is a lesson in faith. It is also a lesson in civic responsibility that speaks the republic we seek to build. We are aware of the sacrifices many of you have made to celebrate this festival with dignity. The very spirit of Tabaski is sharing. At this moment, I would like to ask our revered religious and traditional leaders to continue keeping our country in their prayers. I would also like to entrust to them our heroes who could not be in Senegal today because they have gone to defend the nation's colors as part of the 2026 World Cup. To the imams, religious and traditional leaders, may your prayers rise to the Almighty for peace in the nation. I wish everyone an excellent celebration. Happy Tabaski, and may God bless Senegal.
Que Dieu bénisse le Sénégal.
Senegalese President Bassirou Diomaye Faye.
More stories coming up on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
Now, in neighboring Gambia, President Adama Barrow is urging citizens to safeguard peace and national unity as the country prepares for general elections in December 2026. President Barrow, who spoke on Wednesday shortly after joining Muslims in Banjul for Eid prayers, also advocated for dialogue and stability in the Middle East. WDR's correspondent Sandona Mendy reports.
Against the backdrop of growing political activities ahead of the elections, President Barrow reminds Gambians about the importance of maintaining peace and democratic values. He calls on political parties, supporters, and citizens to conduct their campaigns peacefully and contribute towards free, fair, and credible elections.
This year is a very important year in our calendar. The year is an election year. So we would advise Gambians to maintain peace, maintain stability in this country, so that we will organize a very successful election. Election that is peaceful, election that is transparent, election that will be recognized by the international community.
The appeal comes at a time when the political mobilization is gradually intensifying across the Gambia, with parties engaging communities ahead of the polls. President Barrow also turned attention to ongoing tensions in the Middle East, describing peace as essential for stability and development. Speaking in his capacity as chair of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, he urges parties involved in the conflicts to embrace dialogue and pursue peaceful solutions in the interest of humanity.
And in the Middle East, they are all Muslim countries. And our religion calls for peace. Our religion is a religion, preaches peace. So we expect that all of us should maintain peace. But I call on the parties that are engaged in the war to engage in dialogue. Dialogue is the only way forward.
The Gambian president further congratulates Gambians at home and abroad for the peaceful observance of Eid al-Adha as Muslims across the country continue celebrations marked by prayers, family gatherings, and acts of charity. For Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, Sangdona Mendy, reporting from Banjul.
More on the Tabaski celebration. An environmental group in the Nigerian capital has launched a cleanup campaign for free streets of Niamey from animal waste that usually pollutes the environment during the festive period. The campaign, known as the Ecological Tabaski, is largely undertaken by the organization The Young Volunteers for the Environment. These volunteers, in addition to the exercise, are exploring the value chain of converting waste to wealth They intend to transform the animal waste into compost for agricultural purposes. Abdullahi Hassan gives the details in the following report.
In Niamey, the country's largest city, the days following Tabaski are synonymous with streets littered with sheep waste from the previous day. Foul odors and health risks then parade the capital. To address this problem, the environmental organization Young Volunteers for the Environment launched the Ecological Tabaski Initiative. The movement collects sheep manure, which is then transformed into compost for agricultural use. Sani Ayuba is the organization's director.
In any case, everywhere people have used or at least made compost with stomach contents or other waste from Tabaski, I think they have seen a better yield. They have had positive results, which is why others continue to do it.
Sani Ayuba also states that this campaign to collect waste from sheep slaughtered during the Tabaski festival is now showing concrete results on the ground.
The angema can be seen in the changing attitudes of the population towards the use of wood. According to the Niger Timber Operators Association, for some time now, the quantity of wood they bring in or sell during the Tabaski festival has drastically decreased.
The next step for these young environmental volunteers is to industrialize the process they launched to maintain the cleanliness of the streets within the capital, Niamey, after each Tabaski festival.
A report filed by Niamey correspondent Yakuba Habibullah and presented by Abdullahi Hassan. Away from the Tabaski festival, Nigeria's opposition politicians are gathering momentum ahead of the 2027 general elections. Former Vice President Atiku Abubakar is now the presidential candidate of the major opposition African Democratic Congress. He defeated former Minister of Transportation Rotimi Amiachi and businessman Mohammed Hayatuddin in the party's nationwide primary election. However, his opponents, including other party members, are raising concerns over the credibility of the primary. WDR's correspondent Yechenu Sasetu reports.
Former Vice President Atiku Abubakar emerged winner of the African Democratic Congress presidential primary after polling over 1.8 million votes. However, the outcome immediately triggered reactions from the major contenders, including former Rivers State Governor Rotimi Amiachi, who questioned the credibility of the process and accused the party leadership of irregularities during the primary. Despite the controversy, Atiku has called on party members to remain united ahead of the 2027 elections, stressing the need for collective action to challenge the ruling party and reposition Nigeria.
I appeal to all those who contested for various positions in our primaries to close ranks with us. There are no winners and no losers. Our people look up to us for leadership. I'm ready to lead.
National leader of the ADC, David Mark, maintains that internal democratic processes were followed throughout the exercise.
I want to appeal directly to our three aspirants. Each of you has served this country with distinction. All of you possess the experience and capacity to offer leadership to Nigeria. However, it can only be one of you who would fly the flag of our party. And tonight, the members of the African Democratic Congress have spoken.
The development comes as political parties intensify consultations, coalition talks, and internal preparations ahead of Nigeria's 2027 general elections. For WADR, Yechenu Sasetu in Abuja.
You are listening to Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio 94.9 FM, Dakar, Senegal, and online at wadr.org. Here is a reminder of our top stories. Burkina Faso suspends student union over terrorism allegations. Senegalese President Diomaye Faye urges calm and national cohesion as the country celebrates Eid al-Adha. Nigeria's former Vice President Atiku Abubakar wins opposition ADC primary for 2027 elections, but critics question his victory. Still ahead in the news, Liberia's Center for Transparency and Accountability raises alarm over missing millions of dollars in government's revenue. We also have guest interview and the sports news, so please stay with us.
West Africa Democracy Radio. It's you speaking.
Thank you for staying with us. We are streaming live on YouTube at WADR and on Facebook, WADR English Service. We turn to issues of accountability. The Center for Transparency and Accountability in Liberia, known as CENTAL, expresses a serious concern over findings in a new audit report that exposes weaknesses in government revenue collection and reconciliation processes between 2018 and 2024. According to the report, more than $250 million and over 23 billion Liberian dollars recorded in transitory accounts could not be traced to the government's general revenue account. The findings raise fresh questions about public financial management and accountability in government. WDR's Monrovia correspondent Abraham Parker reports.
CENTAL is calling for full-scale investigations by the Liberia Anti-Corruption Commission and the Ministry of Justice into the missing $1 million. The organization's executive director, Anna Zimmerman, also urges the legislature's Public Accounts Committee to conduct public hearings into the audited findings. He welcomes ongoing reform measures by the government, but says accountability for past discrepancies remains essential.
The findings presented in this other audit report speak more to the need to strengthen transparency and accountability in the collection and management of financial resources of the country. We call on the Liberia Anti-Corruption Commission, Ministry of Justice, to initiate and timely conclude criminal and other investigations into the many discrepancies and alleged abuses reported to hold those responsible.
Meanwhile, the Center for Transparency and Accountability in Liberia welcomes President Bouakar's submission of 2 landmark bills to the legislature seeking the establishment of war crimes and anti-corruption courts. CENTAL describes the move as critical to tackling corruption and impunity in Liberia.
The court will address long-standing challenges regarding impunity for corruption and other related offenses in Liberia. We call on ordinary Liberians, civil society, the media, and other stakeholders to demand the legislature and executive to complete this very important task.
The civil society group says, despite previous reforms and the creation of anti-corruption institutions, weak prosecution and overcrowded court systems have slowed efforts to hold public officials accountable. For Newslink on WADR, Abraham Parker, Monrovia.
In health news, there is good development for Central Africa, particularly the Democratic Republic of Congo, as pharmaceutical companies race to develop a vaccine against a new strain of Ebola. The outbreak caused by the Budubuyo virus has already claimed more than 200 lives, while suspected cases in the DRC, Uganda, and South Sudan have surpassed 1,000. The fast spread of the virus is raising fresh concerns among health authorities across the region and beyond. The World Health Organization and Africa CDC are now appealing for more than $300 million to step up health measures, including surveillance and cross-border management protocols. Veronica Njai tells us more.
While no approved vaccine currently exists against the new Ebola strain, scientific research is underway to develop a serum. The 2 existing vaccines developed against the first Ebola strain could be tested in an emergency setting. The stockpile of 2,000 doses deployed in the DRC by the Vaccine Alliance Gavi will be tested on primates. According to scientists, this vaccine could offer partial protection against the new Ebola strain. The WHO is also assessing whether these vaccine doses could be used in an emergency clinical trial. Meanwhile, there are specific vaccine candidates against the new Ebola strain. The first, developed by the multinational pharmaceutical company Merck, requires 69 months before trials can begin. The second, on which the University of Oxford is working in collaboration with the Serum Institute in India, could be ready for trials in 2 to 3 months. However, no publicly available scientific data is available regarding its effectiveness. Gavi has launched an advanced purchase commitment to encourage manufacturers to accelerate the development of a vaccine against the new Ebola strain. In the meantime, public health specialists recommend strengthening surveillance and protection measures to avoid the spread of the disease. Uganda, which has been slightly affected by the disease disease has closed its borders to the DRC to prevent any further spread of the virus. The border crossing remains open to a limited number of individuals and groups under strict conditions.
Veronique Njai with those details.
Politics, analysis on major news, social matters, and all. This is A Guest.
Well, as Tabaski celebrations continue across the continent, attention is also turning to another major issue shaping Africa's future, which is leadership. From booming economies and youthful populations to unemployment and governance challenges, African leaders are under growing pressure to deliver results and drive sustainable growth. So, what does effective leadership in Africa look like today? And how can the continent transform its vast potential into real progress? To discuss this, we are joined by Ibra Tisvagi, a veteran executive with more than 3 decades of experience across Africa and the Middle East. He begins by explaining what sets leadership in Africa apart from other regions.
Effective leadership in Africa begins with understanding that Africa is not a single market or culture. Successful leadership was less about authority. That is a problem we have facing in Africa, authority, a one-man authority in many cases, political or business. And more, we need more about integrity, relationships, trust, and cultural intelligence. The leaders who succeeded were those who listened first, respected local knowledge, and build credibility through integrity, performance, humility, and consistency. And this is to separate you from that of the old system. As I told you last time, the old system is the status quo, and the status quo you know very well. My experience on African business leadership consistently highlights the importance of community inclusiveness and cultural sensitivity. That was why I had GE Corporate Citizenship for Africa approving and building various infrastructure in remote areas of many countries. One major difference compared to many Western environments is that leadership in Africa is deeply personal, as you know it very well. When I say personal, once those political or business leaders, once they come to power, they think themselves they are the ultimate.
Africa presents both immense opportunities and complex challenges, as you've mentioned. You look at infrastructure gaps to policy environment. How can leaders navigate these realities while still driving innovation and growth, which the people need?
Very good. Do you know what Africa's greatest challenge is? Its greatest opportunity. The continent, has enormous potential, which I don't need to explain for here. You know it very well.
Yes.
In my experience, leaders who succeed in Africa focus less on obstacles and more on solutions. The problem we see, every part of the world, they tell us about our problems and not about solutions. They build strong local partnership, invest in local talent, and adapt global strategies to local realities. Innovation in Africa is often comes from necessity, finding practical, scalable solutions in difficult environments. The key is balancing vision with execution in my continent. Africa does not lack ideas or opportunities anymore. It often struggles with implementation, infrastructure, and policy consistency because of leadership. Studies on Africa's infrastructure and development in challenge consistently highlight governance, execution capability, and local capacity building as the critical drivers of sustainable growth. Ultimately, leaders who create lasting impact are those who remain patient, agile, and committed to building institutions and ecosystems instead of personnel.
When you look at this generation or the next generation of African leaders, what mindset or leadership qualities do you believe are most critical for transforming the continent's economic future?
The future of Africa will be shaped by its youth. So successful leaders must actively listen, empower others, and build systems that bring more people to the economy rather than leave them behind. In short, Africa's transformation will depend on leaders who combine vision with integrity and ambition with service to our people.
Yibra Tezvagi is a veteran executive and leadership expert. And now in sports, beginning with football, the Senegalese national football team have arrived in Charlotte, a city in southern United States, where they will continue their preparations for the 2026 World Cup, which will run until July 19. Before departing Senegal on Wednesday evening, the team had their final training session earlier the same day in Diamniadio with the physical trainer. Sadio Mane and his teammates will play their first friendly match against the United States in Charlotte, where the Lions will remain until June 7 before heading to San Antonio, Texas. There they will face Saudi Arabia in the preparatory friendly. The reigning African champions will then travel to their training camp in New Jersey in the northern United States on June 11. And finally, in tennis, Egyptian player Maya Sharif was the only African competitor in the women's singles main draw at Roland Garros 2026 in Paris, France. At this year's edition, the 30-year-old Okaro native, ranked 129th in the WTA standings, secured her place in the main draw after successfully coming through the qualifying rounds. However, her campaign ended early. On Tuesday, Sharif faced Hungary's Damal Gafi in the first round and lost in two tightly contested sets, 7-5 and 6-4. That's the latest in the world of sports. With that, we've come to the end of this edition of Newslink on West Africa, Democracy Radio, broadcasting from Dakar, Senegal, on 94.9 FM and online at wadr.org. Thank you for listening, and many thanks to Ismaila Kamara and Joacino Kappa Gomes for the technical support. Do interact with us via our social media platforms, including X, Instagram, and Facebook at WADR English. I am Augustine Curley. Good evening.
We thank you for listening to Newslink in Nigeria on Love FM Abuja and Darling FM Owerri. In the Gambia on Hot FM Banjul, Hilltop FM and Veritas Radio in Serekunda. Thank you for listening on Alternative Youth Radio Lofa County, Liberia, Radio Kegaman in Nimba County, and DCN Radio Riverses County. A big thank you to Radio Baft FM in Sierra Leone for listening, and in Ghana we thank Radio Pad in Damango and Royals FM in Wenchi. Thank you all for listening to